Fragmentary picked captures recovered from Skitarii helmet feeds show a narrow corridor inside an industrial structure whose architecture resembles the internal maintenance arteries common to forge complexes of the Imperium. The corridor is poorly illuminated. Atmospheric particulates drift through the beam of a lumen strip damaged during prior fighting. Audio registers metallic footfalls, intermittent static bursts from damaged Vox relays, and the rapid discharge of galvanic weaponry somewhere beyond the frame. The recording is unstable, suggesting the operator was either moving quickly or suffering interference from environmental radiation. Within several seconds of footage, a humanoid figure enters the field of view. The form appears partially obscured by motion blur. Frame-by-frame analysis indicates that the subject moves at a speed exceeding standard human infantry reaction time. The figure's limbs appear elongated and jointed with mechanical articulation rather than natural musculature. The subject carries two curved blades, each producing a faint haze where the metal contacts the air. Subsequent analysis by Adeptus Mechanicus archivists suggests the haze is a result of oxidizing chemical agents dispersing from the weapon's surfaces. The Skitarii operator attempts to track the target with a galvanic rifle. The weapon discharges once. The projectile does not connect with the target. Instead, the recording shows the figure closing the distance between itself and the operator in less than a second. The picked feed abruptly destabilizes, followed by visual artifacts consistent with sudden mechanical impact. The final frame shows the blade edge entering the lower portion of the camera field before the recording terminates. This particular picked record was catalogued by Forge World data archives several decades after its initial capture. Similar recordings appear across multiple war zones where Adeptus Mechanicus forces have deployed specialized infiltration units. Although the individual operators vary in serial designation and combat assignment, the recorded combat behavior remains consistent. Rapid approach, silence of movement despite mechanical structure, and the use of chemically treated blades designed to accelerate structural degradation in organic and metallic targets alike. The classification eventually applied to the figure observed in these recordings was established through cross-referencing equipment signatures, limb construction patterns, and the distinctive blade emissions noted in several battlefield archives. Adeptus Mechanicus records identify the combatant not as a conventional Skitarii soldier, but as a specialized cybernetic assassin created through the most extreme forms of Mechanicus, augmentation, and doctrinal engineering. These constructs belong to a distinct subdivision of the Sicarian battle formations employed by Forge Worlds across the Imperium. The designation applied to these units is Sicarian Ruststalker. Within the military hierarchy of the Adeptus Mechanicus, Ruststalkers represent one of the most specialized forms of Skitarii-derived combat servitors. Their purpose is neither conventional line warfare nor static defense. Instead, they function as close-range elimination units designed to penetrate fortified environments, dismantle enemy personnel at close quarters, and disrupt mechanical systems through the application of corrosive weaponry. Understanding the origins of the Sicarian Ruststalker requires examination of the broader development of the Skitarii legions themselves. The Adeptus Mechanicus maintains large standing forces composed primarily of cybernetically enhanced soldiers. These soldiers, known collectively as Skitarii, are created through systematic augmentation procedures that replace large portions of the human body with mechanical components designed to improve combat efficiency, survivability, and obedience. The process begins with recruitment from Forge World populations. Many Skitarii candidates originate from the labour strata of industrial hive districts surrounding forge complexes. Others are selected from among Mechanicus servitor stock or volunteers seeking advancement through augmentation. Regardless of origin, candidates undergo extensive surgical transformation that integrates cybernetic limbs, neural interface systems, and enhanced sensory arrays directly into the human nervous system. Standard Skitarii units serve primarily as ranged infantry, equipped with galvanic rifles, radium carbines, and other advanced weapons developed within Mechanicus Manufactoria. However, Battlefield analysis across multiple centuries revealed operational gaps in close-quarters combat capability. While Skitarii troops demonstrated high levels of accuracy and resilience at medium range, engagements within confined industrial environments often expose limitations in reaction speed and maneuverability. Forge World strategists began addressing this limitation during the late stages of the Great Crusade and the millennia that followed. Mechanicus research divisions experimented with heavily modified Skitarii variants capable of operating effectively within narrow corridors, reactor maintenance shafts, and urban ruins where conventional range formations could not deploy effectively. These experimental programs eventually produced the Sicarian classification of Skitarii units. The term Sicarian derives from ancient Terran linguistic references associated with concealed blades and sudden assassination, a naming convention considered appropriate for soldiers designed specifically for close-quarters elimination. Sicarian units differ significantly from baseline Skitarii in both anatomical configuration and combat doctrine. The transformation process replaces the majority of the human body with articulated mechanical limbs capable of rapid acceleration. Internal systems integrate advanced targeting cogitators, predictive motion algorithms, and chemical dispersal equipment intended to enhance lethality at short range. Within this classification, two primary variants emerged over time: the Sicarian Infiltrator and the Sicarian Ruststalker. While both share similar structural foundations, their operational purposes diverge significantly. Infiltrators specialize in electronic warfare and psychological disruption, using signal interference and sensory manipulation to destabilize enemy forces. Ruststalkers, by contrast, focus exclusively on physical elimination and the systematic dismantling of hostile units. The origins of the Ruststalker variant are tied to Mechanicus research into controlled oxidation reactions. Forge World laboratories studying industrial corrosion processes discovered methods by which certain chemical agents could accelerate the breakdown of metallic structures when applied under controlled conditions. These discoveries, initially intended for mining and scrap reclamation operations, were eventually adapted for military use. By integrating dispersal systems directly into melee weapons, Mechanicus engineers created blades capable of triggering rapid oxidative decay upon contact with metal surfaces. Armor plating, weapon housings, and mechanical limbs could be compromised within seconds, dramatically reducing an opponent's ability to maintain structural integrity during combat. The earliest Ruststalker prototypes incorporated these blades alongside reinforced mechanical limbs designed for sudden bursts of speed. Combat trials conducted within Forge World testing arenas demonstrated that augmented operators could close distances far faster than conventional infantry. Once engaged in melee range, the combination of mechanical strength and corrosive weaponry allowed Ruststalkers to dismantle armoured targets with remarkable efficiency. The transformation of a Skitarii candidate into a Ruststalker requires far more invasive augmentation than standard infantry conversion. Much of the organic musculature is removed and replaced with lightweight mechanical actuators. The skeletal structure undergoes reinforcement with ceramite and steel implants, designed to withstand extreme acceleration forces during combat maneuvers. The lower limbs of a Ruststalker are particularly distinctive. Rather than replicating natural human anatomy, the legs are reconstructed using multi-jointed segments that allow rapid directional changes. This configuration grants the operator the ability to move across uneven terrain, climb structural surfaces, and accelerate rapidly through confined spaces. Upper limb modifications focus primarily on weapon integration. Ruststalker combat doctrine centers on paired melee weapons mounted directly into the operator's grip systems. The most commonly issued armaments are transonic blades or chordclaw assemblies, each engineered to maximize lethality during rapid engagements. Transonic blades operate by vibrating at extremely high frequencies, generated through internal power systems connected to the Ruststalker's reactor core. When combined with oxidizing chemical coatings, the blade edges produce both mechanical disruption and accelerated corrosion within target materials. Chordclaw weapons incorporate multiple articulated blades capable of gripping and tearing mechanical components from armoured structures. The design allows Ruststalkers to disable enemy weapons, sever limbs, or extract internal systems from damaged machines. Despite the extensive mechanical reconstruction involved, Ruststalker operators retain a portion of their original neural architecture. The human brain remains central to decision-making and situational awareness. However, large portions of emotional processing and higher cognitive functions are suppressed through neural conditioning. This conditioning is necessary to maintain combat efficiency during high-speed engagements. Ruststalkers must react instantly to shifting battlefield conditions while operating in environments where hesitation could result in catastrophic damage to their own mechanical systems. Mechanicus neuroengineers therefore implant specialized cogitator modules directly into the operator's neural pathways. These modules analyze environmental data and feed predictive motion patterns into the Ruststalker's motor systems. As a result, many observers describe their movements as unnatural or insect-like, characterized by abrupt changes in direction and sudden bursts of acceleration. The armor worn by Ruststalkers reflects their specialized role. Unlike heavier Skitarii units equipped with extensive plating, Ruststalkers rely on lightweight armor segments designed to preserve mobility. Plates composed of layered ceramite and reinforced polymer protect vital mechanical joints, while leaving sufficient flexibility for rapid movement. Helmets integrate enhanced optical systems capable of tracking targets across multiple visual spectra. These sensors detect heat signatures, electromagnetic emissions, and chemical traces within the surrounding environment. Such capabilities allow Ruststalkers to pursue targets through smoke-filled corridors, industrial fog, or complete darkness. The operational deployment of Ruststalkers typically occurs in small formations rather than large battalions. Forge World command structures assign them to infiltration teams responsible for breaching enemy defensive networks, sabotaging critical machinery, or eliminating key personnel before larger Mechanicus forces arrive. Although exact production numbers remain restricted within Adeptus Mechanicus archives, evidence suggests that Ruststalker units are present on many major Forge Worlds throughout the Imperium. Each Forge World manufactures its own variations of Skitarii constructs, resulting in subtle differences in limb construction, armor configuration, and weapon calibration. Despite these variations, the underlying purpose remains constant. Ruststalkers exist to operate where other Mechanicus soldiers cannot. Their design prioritizes mobility, lethality, and the ability to dismantle enemy machinery through chemical and mechanical means. By the opening centuries of the 41st millennium, Ruststalkers had become a recognized element of Mechanicus battlefield doctrine. Numerous war zones across the Imperium report sightings of these units, operating alongside Skitarii rangers, vanguard formations, and larger cybernetic constructs. Their presence often signals a shift in operational strategy. When Ruststalkers appear within a theatre of war, it generally indicates that the Adeptus Mechanicus intends to engage enemies within confined environments, such as manufactorums, hive underlevels, or orbital station interiors. The combination of mechanical speed, corrosive weaponry, and relentless neural conditioning makes Ruststalkers particularly effective in such conditions. Enemies encountering them at close range frequently report confusion and disorientation, as the constructs close distances far faster than expected for humanoid combatants. Although many Imperial commanders view the Adeptus Mechanicus primarily as providers of technology and logistical support, the existence of Ruststalker units demonstrates that Forge Worlds maintain highly specialized combat capabilities of their own. These forces are designed not merely to defend Mechanicus facilities, but also to pursue strategic objectives across contested regions of the Imperium. The emergence of the Sicarian Ruststalker therefore reflects a broader pattern within Mechanicus military evolution. Over thousands of years, the Forge Worlds have refined their Skitarii forces into numerous specialized forms, each tailored for particular environments and tactical requirements. Among these, The Ruststalker stands as one of the most aggressive examples of cybernetic warfare doctrine. Its origins lie in the systematic transformation of human soldiers into mechanized hunters capable of dismantling enemies through speed, precision, and controlled corrosion. The figure captured in the damage-picked recording at the beginning of this account therefore represents more than a single combatant. It represents the culmination of centuries of experimentation in cybernetic augmentation, chemical weapon engineering and battlefield analytics conducted within the vast industrial networks of the Adeptus Mechanicus. The result is a construct that moves with mechanical precision, yet retains the predatory instincts of the human mind from which it was derived. And within the labyrinthine war zones of the Imperium, such constructs continue to operate wherever the Forge worlds deem their presence necessary. The physical configuration of the Sicarian Ruststalker reflects a deliberate design philosophy developed by the Adeptus Mechanicus over many centuries of battlefield experimentation. While most Skitarii soldiers retain a body plan that remains recognizably human, despite cybernetic augmentation, the Ruststalker represents a far more radical departure from baseline physiology. The construct's silhouette alone reveals a combat organism engineered primarily for speed, precision, and lethality in confined environments. A typical Ruststalker stands approximately 1.8 to 2 meters in height, depending on the configuration of its mechanical limbs and the degree of spinal reinforcement installed during augmentation. Total body mass varies between 90 and 120 kilograms, though this weight is distributed differently than in organic humans. Much of the internal structure is composed of lightweight alloys and composite skeletal frameworks designed to withstand sudden acceleration without sacrificing maneuverability. The lower limbs of the Ruststalker are among its most distinctive anatomical features. Rather than replicating the linear joint alignment of a human leg, the Adeptus Mechanicus reconstructs the limbs using segmented mechanical actuators. Each segment contains multiple rotation points supported by magnetic stabilizers and internal servo motors. This structure allows the Ruststalker to adjust its posture and stride with exceptional flexibility. When moving at speed, the Ruststalker's gait can appear erratic or disjointed to observers unfamiliar with Mechanicus combat constructs. However, the apparent irregularity is the result of predictive movement algorithms constantly adjusting limb orientation to maintain balance while accelerating through complex terrain. Ruststalkers can pivot sharply, climb steep industrial surfaces, and traverse narrow structural beams that would challenge even lightly equipped human soldiers. The mechanical legs also contain reinforced anchoring claws integrated into the feet. These claws allow the Ruststalker to maintain traction on metal flooring, maintenance ladders, and machinery housings. In industrial environments such as forge complexes or hive manufactorums, where surfaces are frequently coated with lubricants or debris, this capability significantly improves stability during combat engagements. The torso of the Ruststalker retains elements of human anatomy, but is heavily modified to support internal power systems and combat processes. The rib structure is partially replaced with armoured plates that protect the central reactor core and neural interface systems. Beneath these plates are cooling conduits and energy transfer cables, linking the internal reactor to limb actuators and weapon power supplies. The internal power source of a Ruststalker typically consists of a compact reactor unit designed for sustained combat operations. This reactor supplies electrical energy to servo motors, sensory systems, and weapon oscillators. The energy output is carefully regulated by cogitator modules embedded within the torso, preventing power surges that could disrupt motor control during rapid maneuvers. Upper limb construction prioritizes both dexterity and mechanical strength. Each arm contains reinforced servos capable of delivering far greater striking force than human musculature. The hands are articulated through multiple microactuators, allowing the Ruststalker to maintain precise control over its melee weapons even while executing rapid motion sequences. Despite the heavy augmentation, some organic components remain within the torso and cranial cavity. The human brain is preserved and connected directly to the Ruststalker's neural control systems. Extensive neural implants bridge the gap between organic cognition and mechanical execution, allowing the operator to control the cybernetic body with remarkable responsiveness. The head of the Ruststalker is enclosed within a specialized helmet unit designed to protect sensory systems and neural implants. The helmet structure typically features elongated optical housings that contain multi-spectrum targeting arrays. These sensors enable the Ruststalker to detect movement through thermal signatures, electromagnetic emissions, and chemical traces in the surrounding air. Optical sensors operate continuously during deployment, feeding environmental data directly into the operator's neural interface. Target identification routines can analyze multiple moving objects simultaneously, prioritizing threats based on proximity, weapon signatures, and structural vulnerability. This allows Ruststalkers to select optimal targets during chaotic close-quarters engagements. Auditory sensors integrated into the helmet detect subtle changes in environmental sound patterns. These systems can identify the movement of armored troops within adjacent corridors or detect the mechanical resonance produced by active machinery. Such information allows Ruststalkers to anticipate enemy movement even when direct visual contact has not yet been established. Chemical sensors also play an important role in the Ruststalker's tracking capability. Forge World engineers have incorporated atmospheric analyzers capable of detecting trace compounds associated with specific materials such as propellant residue, machine lubricants, or biological contaminants. These analyzers can assist Ruststalkers in locating hidden adversaries within complex industrial environments. The armor worn by Ruststalkers is deliberately minimal compared to other Mechanicus constructs. Rather than relying on heavy plating, the design uses strategically placed armor segments that protect critical systems without restricting mobility. Key joint locations such as the shoulders, hips, and knees are shielded by curved ceramite plates capable of deflecting small arms fire and shrapnel. The remaining surfaces of the body are often covered in flexible protective materials, including layered polymer fibers and thin metallic mesh. These materials provide limited protection against fragmentation, while preserving the Ruststalker's ability to move rapidly through narrow spaces. Excessive armor weight would reduce acceleration and compromise the construct's intended role as a high-speed assault unit. One of the most recognizable visual features of the Ruststalker is the arrangement of cables and conduits running along its limbs and torso. These external lines carry power and coolant between internal systems and weapon assemblies. While they appear exposed, most are reinforced with protective sheathing capable of resisting minor damage during combat. The coloration of Ruststalker armor varies depending on the forge world that produced the unit. Many retain the red and metallic tones commonly associated with Adeptus Mechanicus forces. However, additional markings such as cog symbols, unit serial numbers, and data glyphs are frequently inscribed onto armor plates to indicate production lineage and battlefield designation. Although the physical structure of the Ruststalker is imposing, its most distinctive features are its weapons. These armaments represent some of the most specialized melee systems produced by Mechanicus Manufactoria. Among the most common weapons issued to Ruststalker units are transonic blades. These weapons resemble elongated swords with narrow profiles and reinforced spines. Embedded within the blade housing is a vibration generator connected to the Ruststalker's internal reactor. When activated, the generator causes the blade edge to oscillate at extremely high frequencies. This oscillation significantly increases the cutting capability of the weapon. Even heavily reinforced materials such as ceramite armor or industrial steel can be compromised when struck repeatedly by a vibrating edge operating at transonic frequencies. The vibrations also produce a distinctive humming sound that can often be heard moments before a Ruststalker enters close combat. In addition to mechanical vibration, many transonic blades are coated with chemical agents designed to accelerate oxidation in metallic targets. These agents react rapidly upon contact with exposed metal surfaces. When combined with the blade's oscillation, the result is a destructive effect that weakens armor plating and mechanical components within seconds. Another commonly issued Ruststalker weapon is the chordclaw. This device consists of a compact housing containing multiple articulated blades arranged around a central gripping mechanism. When deployed, the blades extend outward and can clamp onto mechanical structures or enemy limbs. The chordclaw is designed primarily for disassembly rather than simple cutting. Once attached to a target, the Ruststalker can apply rotational force through its arm servos. This action allows the construct to tear apart armor segments, remove weapon systems, or disable mechanical joints. Against lightly armored infantry, the chordclaw can sever limbs or crush internal organs with extreme efficiency. Many Ruststalker units carry one transonic blade and one chordclaw, allowing them to alternate between cutting and tearing attacks depending on the situation. Some Forge worlds equip their units with paired transonic blades for maximum offensive capability, while others prefer dual chordclaws for dismantling mechanical targets such as combat servitors or armoured drones. The Ruststalker's weapon systems are supported by integrated control modules that synchronize blade movement with the construct's predictive combat algorithms. When a Ruststalker identifies a vulnerable point in an opponent's armour, the neural interface can guide the weapon toward that location with minimal delay. This coordination between machine processing and human cognition enables Ruststalkers to exploit structural weaknesses with exceptional precision. In addition to melee weapons, Ruststalkers often carry small utility tools designed to assist with infiltration tasks. These tools may include cutting torches for breaching access panels, data spikes for interfacing with machine terminals, or compact explosives for disabling structural supports. However, such equipment is secondary to the primary function of close combat elimination. Another important component of the Ruststalker's gear is its neural control architecture. Embedded within the cranial cavity and upper spinal column are specialized cogitator units, responsible for processing battlefield data. These systems integrate sensory inputs from optical, auditory, and chemical detectors, while simultaneously controlling the movement of mechanical limbs. The neural interface functions as a bridge between organic cognition and machine computation. While the preserved human brain retains overall control of the body, many reflexive actions are delegated to automated subsystems. For example, if an incoming projectile is detected within a certain proximity, the motor control system can initiate an evasive maneuver before the operator consciously processes the threat. This level of automation is necessary because Ruststalkers frequently operate at speeds exceeding natural human reaction time. Without assistance from machine processors, the operator would struggle to maintain control over the cybernetic body during rapid engagements. To maintain operational efficiency, Ruststalkers undergo regular maintenance within Forge World facilities. Tech priests inspect servo motors, recalibrate targeting arrays, and replenish the chemical reservoirs used by oxidizing weapon coatings. These maintenance rituals are performed according to strict Mechanicus protocols, often accompanied by liturgical recitations acknowledging the machine spirits within the construct. Despite their heavy reliance on technology, Ruststalkers are not autonomous machines. The presence of a human mind within the system remains essential for interpreting complex battlefield conditions and making tactical decisions beyond the capability of pre-programmed algorithms. This hybrid nature, combining organic cognition with mechanical execution, represents a central principle of Adeptus Mechanicus doctrine. Rather than replacing humanity entirely with machines, the Mechanicus seeks to merge biological and technological components into forms capable of achieving greater efficiency than either could alone. Within this philosophy, the Sicarian Ruststalker stands as a particularly extreme example. Its distinctive anatomy, specialized weapons, and integrated control systems all serve a single purpose: to create a combat entity capable of moving through the battlefield with speed and precision while dismantling opponents through advanced mechanical and chemical means. The result is a construct whose appearance, equipment, and capabilities reflect the priorities of the Forge worlds that created it. Every component of the Ruststalker's design is optimized for close-quarters warfare, where the combination of mobility, sensory awareness, and corrosive weaponry allows it to dominate confined battlefields. Understanding these distinctive traits and tools provides the necessary foundation for examining the final dimension of the Ruststalker's nature. Beyond its physical structure and weapons, the construct also embodies a unique psychological and organizational role within the Adeptus Mechanicus war machine. These characteristics will be examined further in the next stage of analysis. The psychological profile of the Sicarian Ruststalker differs significantly from that of conventional Skitarii soldiers. While both originate from human recruits subjected to extensive cybernetic augmentation, the mental conditioning applied during the Ruststalker conversion process produces a behavioral pattern that is markedly distinct from other Mechanicus infantry formations. The Ruststalker is not simply a soldier enhanced with mechanical limbs. It is a hybrid organism whose cognitive functions have been reshaped to operate effectively within the extreme tempo of close-quarters cybernetic warfare. The process begins with the selection of suitable candidates from existing Skitarii ranks or Forge World populations. Candidates are evaluated according to several criteria, including neurological resilience, reaction time, tolerance for cybernetic integration, and psychological stability under high-stress conditions. Individuals chosen for Ruststalker transformation typically demonstrate exceptional adaptability when interfacing with machine systems. They also exhibit a level of emotional detachment that reduces the risk of cognitive collapse during the augmentation process. Once selected, the candidate undergoes a series of surgical procedures that permanently alter both the body and the neural architecture of the brain. During these operations, numerous implants are embedded within the cranial cavity and along the spinal column. These implants interface directly with the central nervous system, allowing machine processors to interpret neural signals and convert them into mechanical movement commands. However, the transformation extends beyond simple neural interfacing. Adeptus Mechanicus neuroengineers deliberately suppress large portions of the brain associated with emotional response, long-term introspection, and independent social behavior. The objective is not to eliminate consciousness entirely, but to refine the mental state of the operator into a form optimized for immediate action and rapid tactical interpretation. As a result, the personality of a Ruststalker becomes simplified when compared with unmodified humans. The construct retains awareness of its surroundings and can respond intelligently to complex battlefield situations. It can recognize allies, interpret commands, and adjust strategies according to the changing conditions of combat. Yet much of the internal dialogue that normally accompanies human thought is reduced or absent. Many Ruststalkers operate with a mental clarity that Mechanicus archivists sometimes describe as narrow focus cognition. Their thoughts concentrate almost exclusively on present objectives, environmental data, and threat analysis. Emotional distractions such as fear, anger, or hesitation are significantly diminished by neural inhibitors embedded within the augmentation system. This altered mental state contributes directly to the construct's combat effectiveness. Close-quarters warfare demands instantaneous reactions and constant awareness of spatial movement. By suppressing emotional interference, the Ruststalker can process battlefield information with exceptional efficiency while maintaining physical coordination at extremely high speeds. Despite the reduction of emotional complexity, the Ruststalker is not devoid of identity. The surviving human mind continues to function as the central interpreter of sensory information. Memories from the operator's previous life are not always completely erased during augmentation. In some cases, fragments of personality persist beneath the layers of neural conditioning. These remnants rarely influence battlefield behavior, but they occasionally manifest in subtle ways. Some Ruststalkers exhibit preferred movement patterns or combat approaches that deviate slightly from standard tactical algorithms. Others demonstrate unusual persistence when pursuing particular targets, suggesting that traces of personal instinct remain embedded within the cybernetic structure. The Adeptus Mechanicus does not consider these remnants problematic unless they interfere with operational efficiency. From the perspective of the Forge worlds, the human mind is simply another component within the machine system. As long as the component continues to perform its function reliably, minor variations in behavior are tolerated. Within the organizational hierarchy of the Adeptus Mechanicus, Ruststalkers occupy a specialized position among the broader Skitarii forces. They are not independent military units operating outside the command structure. Instead, they function as elite assault elements integrated into Skitarii maniples and larger Mechanicus expeditionary armies. Forge Worlds typically organize Ruststalkers into small combat groups, referred to as kill formations or strike cells. Each group operates under the supervision of a Skitarii Alpha, or a designated command node capable of transmitting tactical instructions through encrypted data channels. These command nodes coordinate the movements of Ruststalker units during infiltration missions or targeted assaults. Although Ruststalkers possess advanced neural interfaces, their autonomy remains limited by design. Adeptus Mechanicus doctrine emphasizes strict hierarchical control over all Skitarii constructs. Orders originate from higher authorities such as tech priests Magi Dominus, or Forge World command councils. These directives are transmitted through data networks linking the various elements of the Mechanicus war machine. When deployed in combat, Ruststalkers typically operate ahead of the main Skitarii battle line. Their speed and sensory systems allow them to move through confined terrain while identifying enemy positions and vulnerabilities. Once a breach point has been located, the Ruststalker cell engages hostile forces directly, dismantling defensive elements and clearing pathways for advancing Mechanicus troops. The relationship between Ruststalkers and other Skitarii units reflects a complementary tactical philosophy. Skitarii Rangers and Vanguard provide ranged firepower and area control, while Ruststalkers specialize in rapid close-range elimination. Larger Mechanicus constructs such as Castellan robots and Onager dune crawlers supply heavy fire support during major engagements. This layered approach to warfare allows Forge World armies to adapt to a wide range of battlefield environments. In open terrain dominated by long-range weaponry, Ruststalkers may remain in reserve until enemy forces attempt to breach Mechanicus positions. In dense urban or industrial environments, however, Ruststalkers often become the primary offensive element due to their superior mobility within restricted spaces. Another significant aspect of Ruststalker organization is their integration with Mechanicus data networks. Each unit carries encrypted transmitters that constantly relay battlefield telemetry back to command cogitators. Information gathered by their sensory arrays contributes to the broader situational awareness of the Mechanicus army. For example, when a Ruststalker detects the movement of enemy troops within a manufactorum corridor, the sensor data can be transmitted instantly to nearby Skitarii Ranger units. Those units may then reposition to intercept the threat while the Ruststalker continues its advance. This flow of information creates a coordinated battlefield environment where individual units operate as components of a larger computational network. The Adeptus Mechanicus views such integration as an extension of the Omnissiah's divine order. From their perspective, every mechanical component and cybernetic soldier contributes to a vast machine system dedicated to the preservation of knowledge and technological supremacy within the Imperium. Because of this philosophical framework, Ruststalkers are not treated as independent warriors with personal ambitions or individual recognition. They are considered functional elements within the Mechanicus war apparatus. Their value lies not in personal heroism, but in the efficiency with which they accomplish assigned objectives. Nevertheless, battlefield records indicate that Ruststalkers often inspire unease among both allies and enemies. Imperial Guard soldiers who have witnessed Ruststalker operations frequently describe the constructs as unsettling due to their silent movement and abrupt attacks. Unlike conventional infantry, Ruststalkers rarely shout commands or vocalize during combat. Their communication occurs primarily through encrypted data bursts transmitted between neural interfaces. To an external observer, a Ruststalker cell may appear to move without coordination, yet every motion is guided by continuous data exchange between units and command nodes. This silent cooperation contributes to the impression that Ruststalkers behave more like a pack of mechanical predators than a group of individual soldiers. The analogy is not entirely inaccurate. Mechanicus engineers intentionally designed their combat algorithms to mimic efficient hunting behaviours observed in biological predators. When several Ruststalkers pursue the same target group, their movements often divide the enemy formation into smaller segments. One construct may attack from the front while another approaches from an unexpected angle. These maneuvers occur with minimal delay, overwhelming opponents who are unprepared for such rapid coordination. Despite their effectiveness, Ruststalkers are not invulnerable. Their relatively light armour leaves them susceptible to heavy weapon fire if caught in open terrain. Explosive ordnance can also damage the exposed cables and actuators that power their limbs. For this reason, Ruststalkers rely heavily on speed and stealth rather than endurance. Forge World commanders therefore deploy them carefully, selecting environments where their strengths can be used to maximum effect. In the narrow corridors of space stations, hive cities, or forge complexes, Ruststalkers can exploit structural obstacles to close the distance with enemy forces before sustained firepower becomes a threat. The continued presence of Ruststalkers across numerous war zones demonstrates that the Adeptus Mechanicus considers them an essential component of its military capabilities. Over thousands of years, the Forge Worlds have refined the design of these constructs through incremental improvements in cybernetics, neural interfacing, and weapon technology. Each new generation of Ruststalkers incorporates lessons learned from previous campaigns. Combat data collected by their sensor arrays is archived within Mechanicus databanks, where tech priests analyze the information to improve future production models. This iterative process ensures that the construct evolves gradually as new technologies become available. In a broader sense, the Ruststalker embodies the core philosophy of the Adeptus Mechanicus regarding the relationship between humanity and machinery. The Forge Worlds believe that human limitations can be overcome through systematic integration with technological systems. Flesh alone is considered fragile and inefficient, but flesh combined with machine logic can produce a far more capable organism. The Ruststalker represents one of the most advanced expressions of that belief within the Skitarii legions. The construct retains the cognitive flexibility of the human brain while relying on mechanical limbs and processes to achieve levels of speed and precision unattainable by unaugmented soldiers. From a strategic perspective, the Ruststalker also illustrates how the Adeptus Mechanicus approaches warfare within the Imperium. Rather than relying solely on massive armies or overwhelming firepower, the Forge Worlds often prefer specialized units designed to perform highly specific tasks. Ruststalkers fulfill the role of precision eliminators capable of disrupting enemy operations at critical moments. When examined within the wider context of Mechanicus military doctrine, the Ruststalker can be understood as both a technological achievement and a practical solution to the challenges of close-quarters combat. Its design integrates multiple disciplines including cybernetics, chemical engineering, neural science, and battlefield analytics. The result is a construct that moves with the coordination of a machine network while retaining the adaptive awareness of a human mind. This combination allows Ruststalkers to operate effectively in environments where traditional infantry formations would struggle to maintain cohesion. In conclusion, the Sicarian Ruststalker occupies a distinctive place within the armies of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Its personality has been reshaped through neural conditioning to emphasize focus and immediate response. Its organizational alignment places it within specialized Skitarii strike formations responsible for infiltration and elimination missions, and its existence reflects the broader technological ideology of the Forge Worlds, where the fusion of flesh and machine is seen as the path toward greater efficiency and survival. Through centuries of refinement and battlefield deployment, Ruststalkers have become a recognizable symbol of Mechanicus cybernetic warfare. They stand not as individual heroes within Imperial legend, but as precise instruments of the Omnissiah's technological will, deployed wherever the Forge Worlds require swift and decisive dismantling of their enemies. Records preserved within the data archives of the Adeptus Administratum rarely focus on the operational details of specialized Skitarii constructs. The Administratum's primary role within the Imperium concerns taxation, resource allocation, population management, and the coordination of vast logistical networks spanning countless worlds. Military reports involving Adeptus Mechanicus forces are therefore typically summarized only in terms of supply impact, casualty distribution, and industrial output requirements. Nevertheless, within certain archived campaign summaries and logistical evaluations, references appear that indirectly document the operational presence of Sicarian Ruststalker units. Administratum analysts reviewing Mechanicus war contributions often approach such units not as individual combatants, but as variables within broader statistical patterns. Ruststalkers are categorized within the data classification of specialized Skitarii assault constructs. Their deployments are typically associated with campaigns involving high-density infrastructure, complex manufacturing facilities, or environments where conventional Imperial infantry encounter severe operational constraints. Several archived reports note that when Mechanicus expeditionary forces deploy Ruststalker formations alongside standard Skitarii maniples, the resulting engagement timelines frequently shorten. Administratum observers attribute this phenomenon to the unit's ability to eliminate enemy resistance within confined spaces that would otherwise require prolonged infantry clearance operations. One logistical evaluation from the latter centuries of the 41st millennium describes a Forge World reclamation campaign conducted on a heavily industrialized planet whose manufactorums had fallen under hostile occupation. Imperial Guard regiments assigned to the theatre initially encountered difficulty advancing through the labyrinthine interior corridors of abandoned production districts. Narrow passageways, obstructed assembly lines, and dense structural frameworks limited the effectiveness of large infantry formations. According to the Administratum summary, the introduction of Mechanicus strike groups including Ruststalker units significantly altered the pace of the operation. These constructs entered the interior networks of the manufactorums, where standard infantry struggled to maneuver. Enemy defensive positions located within machinery halls and maintenance tunnels were neutralized in rapid succession. Administratum scribes did not describe the specific combat methods used by the Ruststalkers. Instead, the reports focus on the measurable consequences of their deployment. Enemy resistance within industrial sectors declined at a rate that exceeded projections by nearly 30%. Supply convoys were able to resume movement through previously contested corridors sooner than expected. The resulting acceleration of production facility recovery reduced the campaign's overall logistical burden on Imperial command. From the perspective of Administratum record keepers, such outcomes represent the primary metric of military effectiveness. Ruststalkers are therefore documented less for their battlefield characteristics and more for the measurable improvements they bring to strategic resource flow. The Adeptus Mechanicus maintains its own far more detailed archives concerning these constructs. Within Forge World data repositories, Ruststalker units are evaluated through continuous performance monitoring conducted by tech priests responsible for Skitarii command networks. Every deployment generates large quantities of telemetry, including movement speed, power consumption, weapon usage, and structural stress experienced by mechanical limbs. This information is transmitted to central cogitator banks where it is analysed in order to refine the design of future Ruststalker models. Over many centuries of deployment, Mechanicus engineers have compiled extensive datasets documenting how these constructs perform across different environments and combat scenarios. One recurring observation within Mechanicus reports concerns the efficiency of Ruststalkers when operating inside large industrial complexes. Such environments resemble the Forge World manufacturing districts where many Ruststalker units undergo initial training simulations. As a result, the constructs demonstrate high familiarity with structural features such as conveyor systems, vertical maintenance shafts, and reactor access corridors. Movement analysis within these spaces indicates that Ruststalkers can navigate dense mechanical infrastructure at speeds significantly greater than baseline Skitarii infantry. Servo-actuated limbs allow the construct to climb structural supports, vault across machinery housings, and traverse narrow service walkways without interrupting forward momentum. Mechanicus engineers note that this mobility advantage contributes directly to the unit's success in close-quarters combat. A Opposing forces accustomed to engaging conventional infantry often rely on fixed firing positions covering predictable approach routes. Ruststalkers disrupt these defensive arrangements by attacking from unexpected angles or approaching along elevated structural pathways inaccessible to heavier troops. Another area of interest within Mechanicus logistical analysis concerns the maintenance requirements of Ruststalker units. While their cybernetic bodies provide exceptional combat capability, the complexity of their internal systems demands regular servicing to maintain operational reliability. Tech Priest maintenance logs reveal that servo motor calibration represents one of the most common procedures performed between deployments. The high-speed maneuvers executed by Ruststalkers place significant strain on joint actuators. Even minor deviations in calibration can reduce movement precision or create imbalance during rapid directional changes. To address this issue, many Forge worlds maintain maintenance chambers designed specifically for Sicarian constructs. Within these chambers, tech priests conduct diagnostic rituals that include the replacement of worn components, purification of internal coolant systems, and recalibration of neural interface modules. Administratum supply ledgers occasionally reference the logistical implications of such maintenance requirements. Although Ruststalkers consume fewer ammunition resources than ranged infantry units, their reliance on specialized mechanical parts creates a different type of supply demand. Replacement servo components, oxidizing chemical agents for weapon coatings, and precision cogitator modules must be transported from Forge World Manufactoria to forward operating bases. Despite these requirements, comparative resource analysis suggests that Ruststalkers remain cost-effective within specific operational contexts. When deployed to clear heavily fortified industrial zones, the constructs can achieve objectives that might otherwise require significantly larger infantry forces. The reduction in troop casualties and ammunition expenditure often offsets the maintenance resources required to sustain Ruststalker units. Mechanicus archives also contain extensive studies concerning the energy consumption patterns of Ruststalker reactors. The compact power cores installed within these constructs must supply continuous electricity to numerous systems, including servo motors, sensory arrays, neural processors, and weapon oscillators. During high-intensity engagements, energy usage increases dramatically as the Ruststalker accelerates through rapid attack sequences. Engineers therefore monitor reactor output carefully to ensure that power reserves remain sufficient for sustained combat operations. In situations where energy levels approach critical thresholds, command nodes may instruct Ruststalkers to temporarily disengage in order to prevent mechanical shutdown. Administratum analysts reviewing Mechanicus operational data have noted that Ruststalker deployments frequently coincide with missions involving the recovery or protection of valuable technological assets. Forge worlds place great importance on the preservation of machinery, data archives, and sacred industrial facilities. Ruststalkers serve as effective guardians of such locations because their corrosive weaponry can dismantle intruding forces before significant damage occurs to surrounding infrastructure. One campaign report describes the defense of a data vault complex containing irreplaceable standard template construct fragments. Hostile raiders attempting to breach the vault encountered Ruststalker patrols moving through the interior corridors of the facility. The attackers reportedly suffered severe losses before reaching the central archive chamber. Administratum officials reviewing the incident concluded that the deployment of Ruststalker units prevented the destruction of valuable technological knowledge that might otherwise have been lost. In their summary, the scribes noted that the preservation of such knowledge represented a strategic gain far exceeding the cost of maintaining the constructs assigned to the defense. The Adeptus Mechanicus itself approaches these results through a more philosophical interpretation rooted in its religious doctrine. Tech priests believe that every machine contains a sacred spirit bestowed by the Omnissiah. The Ruststalker, as a fusion of human consciousness and advanced mechanical engineering, represents a particularly refined vessel for this divine union. Maintenance rituals performed on Ruststalker units therefore carry both technical and spiritual significance. Servicing procedures often include binharic canticles and litanies of activation intended to honour the machine spirits inhabiting the construct's internal systems. From the Mechanicus perspective, maintaining harmony between biological and mechanical components ensures optimal performance in future engagements. Administratum observers typically omit such theological considerations from their reports. Their focus remains on measurable logistical outcomes rather than spiritual interpretations. Nevertheless, the practical results of Ruststalker deployment continue to appear within numerous campaign summaries throughout the Imperium. Across multiple war zones, analysts observe a recurring pattern. When Mechanicus forces commit Ruststalker formations to operations involving confined terrain, the duration of close-quarters engagements tends to decrease significantly. Enemy defensive positions collapse more rapidly, supply routes reopen sooner, and infrastructure recovery progresses at an accelerated pace. These trends have gradually shaped the way Imperial commanders view Adeptus Mechanicus military assistance. Although the Forge Worlds maintain strict autonomy and rarely place their forces under external command, Imperial authorities increasingly recognize the strategic value of specialized constructs such as the Ruststalker. In certain joint operations, administratum planners now incorporate the anticipated presence of Ruststalker units into their logistical projections. Campaign timetables may include estimated reductions in clearance time for industrial sectors based on historical performance data recorded from previous deployments. Such calculations illustrate how the Ruststalker's influence extends beyond the battlefield itself. By altering the speed at which contested infrastructure can be reclaimed or defended, these constructs indirectly affect the flow of resources and the stability of entire planetary economies. From a purely analytical standpoint, the Ruststalker can therefore be understood as a force multiplier within the Mechanicus military structure. Its presence allows Forge World armies to apply concentrated lethality at critical points in the battlefield environment. When used correctly, this precision reduces the need for prolonged engagements that would otherwise strain Imperial supply networks. Mechanicus engineers continue to refine the construct's design based on accumulated combat data. Improvements in servo efficiency, sensor resolution, and chemical weapon delivery systems appear periodically in new production models emerging from Forge World manufactoria. Administratum scribes tracking these developments rarely document the technical details involved. Instead, their records simply note the consistent pattern of operational efficiency associated with Ruststalker deployments. Within the immense administrative machinery of the Imperium, such efficiency represents the highest form of validation. A military unit that accelerates the restoration of industrial output while reducing logistical strain is considered a valuable asset regardless of its underlying technological complexity. For the Adeptus Mechanicus, however, the significance of the Ruststalker extends beyond statistics and resource calculations. To the tech priests who design and maintain these constructs, each Ruststalker represents the successful union of human cognition and mechanical precision. This union continues to be tested across countless battlefields where Forge World interests intersect with the broader conflicts of the Imperium. As long as the Mechanicus maintains its commitment to cybernetic experimentation and industrial warfare, the Ruststalker will remain an integral component of its strategic doctrine. And within the endless streams of administratum reports documenting the rise and fall of campaigns throughout the galaxy, the subtle statistical signatures left by these constructs will continue to reveal their presence long after individual battles have faded from memory. Mechanicus campaign records that mention the deployment of Sicarian Ruststalker units rarely present the constructs as individual protagonists within the narrative of a war. Instead, the documentation typically describes them as operational assets assigned to highly specific tactical functions. When Ruststalkers appear within these records, it is usually during phases of a conflict where terrain complexity or industrial infrastructure prevents conventional formations from advancing efficiently. Their presence is therefore most frequently noted in the detailed operational segments of campaign logs rather than in the broader historical summaries. One of the earliest widely circulated references to Ruststalker battlefield activity appears within Mechanicus records relating to the long series of conflicts collectively known as the War for the Forge World of Metallica during the closing centuries of the 41st millennium. Metallica had become a focal point for multiple hostile incursions due to its immense industrial output and its strategic role in supplying Mechanicus war material to nearby Imperial sectors. Among the many engagements fought across the planet's surface, several occurred within the vast refinery districts and assembly complexes that dominated the Forge World's industrial geography. According to Mechanicus combat telemetry recovered from those battles, Ruststalker formations were deployed within the interior corridors of refinery towers, where hostile forces had established fortified positions. These refinery structures consisted of vertical networks of processing chambers, narrow access platforms, and maintenance shafts connecting multiple levels of industrial machinery. Conventional Skitarii infantry operating with galvanic rifles encountered difficulty clearing such areas due to limited firing lanes and the presence of reinforced machinery blocking line of sight. Ruststalker units were therefore inserted into the structures through secondary access routes originally designed for maintenance personnel. Their mechanical limbs allowed them to ascend ladder networks and climb along exterior pipe systems in order to approach hostile forces from elevated positions. Once inside the refinery complexes, the constructs moved rapidly through the confined corridors, identifying defensive strongpoints and engaging enemy troops at close range. Battle telemetry from these engagements indicates that Ruststalkers frequently advanced in pairs or small clusters. Their sensory arrays continuously transmitted environmental data to Skitarii command nodes positioned outside the immediate combat zone. This allowed Mechanicus commanders to track enemy movements even in areas where direct observation was impossible. The fighting style recorded during the Metallica refinery operations illustrates several core characteristics of Ruststalker combat doctrine. The constructs rarely advanced in straight lines toward enemy positions. Instead, their movement patterns involved abrupt directional shifts that allowed them to avoid predictable firing arcs. Servo-driven limbs enabled rapid acceleration along narrow walkways and vertical surfaces, creating angles of approach that conventional infantry would find difficult to anticipate. When contact with hostile forces occurred, the Ruststalkers closed distance quickly rather than exchanging prolonged ranged fire. Transonic blades were activated moments before engagement, producing the distinctive oscillation hum recorded in multiple combat logs. The constructs then attempted to exploit gaps in armor plating or exposed mechanical joints using precise cutting strikes. Chordclaw weapons were frequently employed when encountering heavily armored opponents or mechanical combat units. Telemetry data suggests that Ruststalkers often targeted structural connections such as weapon mounts or limb joints, rather than attacking central armor plates directly. By disabling critical components, they could neutralize larger opponents without requiring extended combat exchanges. Another recorded instance involving Ruststalker deployment appears in Mechanicus reports from the conflict zone surrounding the Forge world of Ryza. Ryza's advanced plasma weapon manufactoria made it a frequent target for enemy incursions, including raids conducted by Chaos forces seeking to disrupt Imperial production capacity. During one particular incursion in the early centuries of the 41st millennium, hostile forces infiltrated several subterranean plasma reactor facilities beneath the planet's surface. These facilities were constructed within deep underground chambers connected by narrow transit tunnels. The geometry of the tunnels prevented large military formations from entering the complex simultaneously. As a result, defending forces relied heavily on small strike teams capable of navigating the restricted spaces while engaging enemy units within close proximity. Mechanicus command authorities assigned Ruststalker formations to the defense of the reactor chambers due to their ability to operate effectively within the confined environment. Combat reports describe the constructs moving through the tunnel network with minimal noise, guided by multi-spectrum sensors that tracked heat signatures and electromagnetic disturbances produced by intruding forces. When contact occurred, the Ruststalkers initiated rapid assault sequences designed to disrupt enemy coordination. Instead of confronting entire enemy squads simultaneously, they often separated targets by attacking the leading or trailing elements of a formation. This tactic forced hostile troops to divide their attention between multiple directions while navigating the narrow tunnel system. Several RZA battle recordings describe instances in which Ruststalkers emerged from maintenance alcoves or ventilation shafts located above the tunnel pathways. These elevated positions allowed the constructs to descend directly into enemy formations, using the momentum of the drop to increase the force of their initial strikes. After disabling the first group of opponents, Ruststalker units frequently repositioned themselves deeper within the tunnel network before the remaining enemy forces could organize a counterattack. This pattern of rapid engagement followed by immediate relocation created confusion among invading troops who were unable to determine the number or location of the constructs pursuing them. Beyond these well-documented engagements, Ruststalker units also appear within scattered campaign summaries involving exploratory operations conducted by Mechanicus expeditionary fleets. When Forge World fleets encounter derelict stations, ancient manufactorums, or lost research installations, Ruststalkers are often among the first units deployed into the interior spaces of such structures. The reason for this assignment is both practical and tactical. Many abandoned installations contain unstable machinery, narrow maintenance corridors, and unpredictable environmental hazards. Ruststalkers possess the mobility and sensory awareness necessary to navigate these conditions while identifying potential threats hidden within the structure. One expeditionary record from the late 41st millennium describes the exploration of a damaged orbital manufactorum drifting near the edge of an Imperial system. The facility had suffered catastrophic structural damage during an earlier conflict, leaving many of its internal chambers partially collapsed. Ruststalker reconnaissance units were deployed through breach points in the outer hull to determine whether any hostile presence remained within the station. Data from their helmet sensors revealed a network of fractured corridors filled with floating debris and intermittent atmospheric pockets. Despite these conditions, the constructs maneuvered through the interior using magnetic anchoring claws integrated into their feet. This allowed them to maintain stability while moving along damaged structural beams. Within the deeper sections of the station, the Ruststalkers encountered hostile entities occupying the central manufacturing halls. The details of the encounter remain partially redacted in Mechanicus archives, but surviving fragments indicate that the constructs engaged multiple targets while transmitting continuous telemetry to the exploration fleet. The recorded fighting style during the encounter once again emphasizes rapid movement and precise targeting. Ruststalkers approached opponents along structural pathways that bypassed conventional entrances to the chamber. Their transonic blades were used to disable exposed machinery and structural supports before striking the hostile units directly. In addition to direct combat, Ruststalker units often participate in sabotage operations intended to disrupt enemy infrastructure. When Mechanicus forces seek to reclaim or disable hostile industrial installations, Ruststalkers may be assigned to infiltrate production facilities and dismantle critical machinery components. Their oxidizing blade coatings are particularly effective in these operations because they accelerate corrosion within metallic systems. Battlefield reports from such missions frequently describe Ruststalkers severing coolant conduits, disabling reactor control assemblies, or dismantling automated defense systems protecting the facility. Once these systems are neutralized, larger Mechanicus forces can advance without encountering the same level of mechanical resistance. Across these various engagements, a consistent pattern emerges regarding Ruststalker combat behavior. The constructs rarely remain in one position long enough to become predictable targets. Instead, their movements form a continuous sequence of approach, attack, and relocation. This mobility forces opponents to react defensively rather than coordinating sustained counterattacks. Another recurring feature in Mechanicus battle telemetry is the high degree of coordination displayed between Ruststalker units operating within the same strike group. Although individual constructs may appear to move independently, data analysis reveals constant communication through encrypted signal exchanges. These signals allow each unit to adjust its path in response to the actions of its counterparts. For example, When one Ruststalker engages a target group from the front, another may simultaneously approach from the flank using an alternative pathway identified by sensor data. Such maneuvers divide the enemy's attention and create opportunities for rapid elimination. Mechanicus analysts have also noted that Ruststalkers demonstrate exceptional adaptability when encountering unfamiliar environments. Because their neural interfaces integrate machine prediction algorithms with human cognitive flexibility, the constructs can improvise movement strategies when confronted with unexpected obstacles. This capability becomes particularly valuable in battlefields where structural damage has altered the original layout of industrial facilities. Ruststalkers can navigate collapsed corridors, traverse unstable machinery, and exploit vertical access points that would be inaccessible to conventional infantry units. Administratum observers reviewing these combat records rarely comment on the technical details of Ruststalker tactics. Instead, they focus on the broader consequences of such operations. Engagements involving Ruststalker deployments frequently conclude with the rapid collapse of localized resistance, allowing Imperial or Mechanicus forces to secure key infrastructure without prolonged fighting. The cumulative effect of these engagements across multiple war zones has gradually reinforced the reputation of Ruststalkers as specialized close-quarters combatants capable of altering the tempo of a battle. Their presence often indicates that the Adeptus Mechanicus intends to resolve a particular engagement through precision strikes within confined terrain rather than through extended open warfare. As Forge World armies continue to participate in conflicts throughout the Imperium, additional records of Ruststalker activity accumulate within both Mechanicus and Administratum archives. Each engagement contributes further data regarding the effectiveness of these constructs in environments where traditional battlefield doctrines prove insufficient. Through these records, a clearer understanding emerges of how the Ruststalker functions as a tool of Mechanicus warfare. It is not merely a cybernetic soldier, but a highly specialized instrument designed to dismantle enemy forces within the complex industrial landscapes that define much of the Imperium's infrastructure. The continued appearance of Ruststalkers within these battle accounts demonstrates that the Adeptus Mechanicus remains committed to refining and deploying this construct wherever such environments demand its unique capabilities. Further battlefield references to Sicarian Ruststalker units appear within scattered Administratum campaign abstracts and Mechanicus operational fragments recorded across the later centuries of the 41st millennium. While the majority of these records focus on large-scale Imperial wars, the Ruststalker presence is usually observed in narrower operational segments involving industrial complexes, data vaults, orbital facilities, and hive-level infrastructure. The environments described in these records share a common structural characteristic: dense machinery networks and enclosed passage systems where conventional infantry formations struggle to deploy effectively. One Administratum archive concerning the reclamation of a manufactorum cluster on the world of Graia provides a notable example. The manufactorums had been seized by hostile forces seeking to disrupt the planet's production of advanced weapon components. Initial Imperial Guard assaults attempted to retake the district through conventional infantry advances supported by armoured vehicles. However, the dense layout of the factory interior severely limited the manoeuvrability of armoured units, while infantry formations encountered repeated ambushes within the maze of conveyor systems and assembly corridors. Following these difficulties, Mechanicus command elements assigned to the campaign introduced Ruststalker strike cells into the conflict zone. These units were deployed through secondary structural entrances located along ventilation shafts and service conduits originally constructed for maintenance crews. Telemetry gathered from the operation indicates that the Ruststalkers moved through multiple levels of machinery housing simultaneously, bypassing the primary defensive choke points that had stalled earlier Imperial advances. Engagement reports from the manufactorum interior describe rapid collapses of enemy defensive nodes once Ruststalkers reached the contested areas. Several command positions established within machine control chambers were neutralized within minutes of contact. Mechanicus data logs indicate that transonic blades were used extensively to disable control consoles and power relay assemblies before eliminating the personnel operating them. By dismantling these systems, the Ruststalkers interrupted the coordination between hostile units scattered throughout the complex. Administratum analysts reviewing the campaign noted that once the interior control network had been disrupted, resistance within the surrounding production halls weakened significantly. Imperial Guard infantry were able to advance through areas that had previously been considered too dangerous for sustained occupation. The manufactorum cluster was ultimately secured within a time frame substantially shorter than originally projected in the campaign's logistical planning models. Another sequence of battlefield records concerns the defense of an orbital shipyard facility located in a strategically important Imperial system, whose identity remains partially redacted within the Administratum archives. The station served as a refitting location for Mechanicus fleet assets and contained extensive industrial infrastructure responsible for maintaining Starship plasma drives and macro weapon assemblies. During a hostile incursion into the system, enemy boarding forces managed to penetrate several outer sections of the shipyard through damaged docking structures. The attackers attempted to seize control of maintenance sectors containing essential fabrication machinery. These sectors consisted of interconnected gantries and maintenance corridors suspended above large void exposed chambers where ship hull sections were assembled. Mechanicus defense protocols activated Ruststalker patrol units assigned to internal security within the facility. Combat telemetry indicates that the constructs moved rapidly along the gantry network, using their anchoring claws to maintain stability on narrow structural beams. When the boarding forces attempted to advance through the maintenance corridors, the Ruststalkers intercepted them within the confined passageways. Engagement recordings describe repeated close-quarters clashes along the suspended walkways. Ruststalker units approached enemy formations from multiple vertical levels by descending from overhead support structures. Their rapid acceleration allowed them to close the distance before hostile troops could establish stable firing positions along the narrow gantries. Transonic blades proved particularly effective during these engagements because many of the attackers relied on armoured boarding suits designed primarily for protection against vacuum exposure rather than high-frequency cutting weapons. Once armour plating was compromised, the Ruststalkers dismantled the suit's structural components, rendering them immobile within the restricted corridor spaces. Mechanicus reports state that the boarding operation lost operational cohesion within a short period after these engagements began. Without control of the maintenance sectors, the attackers were unable to access the central shipyard command core. Reinforcement units arriving from Mechanicus fleet vessels eventually forced the remaining hostile troops to retreat from the station. Another frequently cited example appears within records associated with explorator missions conducted by the Adeptus Mechanicus in regions of space containing ancient or abandoned installations. Ruststalker units are regularly assigned to such missions due to their ability to navigate damaged industrial environments while identifying potential threats hidden within unstable structures. One expedition log describes an operation in which Mechanicus explorers entered the ruins of a long-abandoned forge complex on a remote world whose surface had been scarred by centuries of neglect and environmental collapse. The outer districts of the facility had partially sunk into the surrounding terrain, leaving many interior chambers accessible only through fractured corridors and collapsed maintenance tunnels. Ruststalker reconnaissance teams were deployed ahead of the main exploration force to map these internal pathways. Sensor data transmitted by their helmet arrays allowed Mechanicus surveyors to construct a navigational model of the underground manufactorum levels. During this process, the Ruststalkers encountered hostile entities occupying portions of the complex. Although many details of the engagement remain restricted within Mechanicus data vaults, the surviving fragments indicate that the constructs conducted a series of rapid strikes within the collapsed tunnel network. The Ruststalkers used their mobility to move through debris fields that would have blocked heavier mechanized units. Their chemical blade coatings were employed not only against enemy combatants, but also against corroded machinery obstructing critical pathways. After several localized engagements, the Ruststalker units transmitted confirmation that the central reactor halls had been secured. This allowed the explorator team to enter the facility and begin recovery of technological artifacts, believed to date back to earlier phases of the Imperium's industrial expansion. Administratum summaries of the mission emphasize that the preservation of these artifacts represented a significant technological gain for the Mechanicus. Across these and other recorded engagements, Ruststalker operations often conclude with a similar pattern of aftermath. Once hostile resistance within the targeted infrastructure collapses, larger Imperial or Mechanicus formations assume responsibility for securing the surrounding territory. Ruststalker units then withdraw from the immediate combat zone and return to designated maintenance areas, where their systems can be inspected and recalibrated. Maintenance reports following intense combat frequently document wear within the servo assemblies, controlling the Ruststalker's lower limbs. High-speed directional shifts performed during engagements place considerable stress on the mechanical joints. Tech priests assigned to Skitarii support units therefore conduct detailed inspections to ensure that structural fatigue has not compromised the construct's mobility. Weapon systems are also examined carefully after each deployment. The chemical reservoirs used to coat transonic blades must be replenished, and the oscillation generators embedded within the weapon housings require recalibration to maintain their cutting efficiency. These procedures are conducted within dedicated Forge World maintenance chambers whenever possible, although temporary field stations can also perform basic servicing when campaigns occur far from Mechanicus industrial centers. From the perspective of the Adeptus Administratum, the aftermath of Ruststalker deployments is measured primarily through logistical outcomes rather than technical observations. Campaign summaries repeatedly highlight reductions in the time required to reclaim industrial zones or secure strategic infrastructure once Ruststalker units become active within the battlefield environment. Shorter engagement durations translate directly into improved stability for Imperial supply networks. When manufactorums resume operations sooner than expected, the production of weapons, vehicles, and replacement equipment can continue without prolonged interruption. Administratum analysts therefore classify Ruststalker deployments as contributing indirectly to the broader economic resilience of Imperial sectors affected by warfare. The Adeptus Mechanicus approaches the aftermath of these engagements through a different analytical framework rooted in technological progress. Every Ruststalker mission produces extensive telemetry describing the performance of its mechanical systems. This information is collected by command cogitators and transferred to Forge World research archives, where tech priests analyze it in detail. Engineers examine patterns in limb acceleration, blade impact forces, and sensor detection ranges to identify areas where future improvements might be possible. Over successive generations of Ruststalker production, these analyses have resulted in gradual enhancements to servo efficiency, neural interface responsiveness, and chemical weapon dispersal mechanisms. In this sense, each battlefield engagement contributes not only to the immediate victory of Mechanicus forces, but also to the long-term evolution of the construct itself. The Ruststalker is therefore both a weapon and a source of experimental data through which the Adeptus Mechanicus refines its understanding of cybernetic warfare. A final comparative analysis drawn from both Administratum and Mechanicus records reveals a broader strategic significance underlying the deployment of Ruststalkers. Within the immense scale of the Imperium's wars, many battles are determined not solely by the size of opposing armies, but by control of critical infrastructure. Industrial districts, reactor complexes, data archives, and orbital facilities often represent the true objectives of a campaign. Ruststalker units are uniquely suited to influencing the outcome of such struggles. Their mobility allows them to penetrate deep into industrial environments where strategic systems are located. Their weapons enable them to dismantle machinery or eliminate defenders with precision. And their integration into Mechanicus command networks ensures that the information they gather contributes to the coordination of larger military forces. For the Adeptus Administratum, these capabilities translate into improved logistical stability across contested regions of the Imperium. For the Adeptus Mechanicus, they represent the successful application of cybernetic engineering to the challenges of modern warfare. Taken together, The accumulated campaign records demonstrate that the Sicarian Ruststalker occupies a specialized yet highly influential position within the Mechanicus military structure. Though rarely visible within the grand narratives of Imperial war histories, the constructs repeatedly appear at critical moments when industrial infrastructure must be seized, defended, or reclaimed. Their presence alters the tempo of these operations by enabling swift and decisive engagements within environments that would otherwise favour prolonged stalemate. As long as the Imperium continues to wage war across the vast network of factories, shipyards, and hive cities that sustain its existence, the Ruststalker will remain an instrument through which the Adeptus Mechanicus exerts precise control over the machinery of battle. Inquisitorial records concerning Sicarian Ruststalker units are scattered across multiple Ordo archives, usually appearing in sealed appendices attached to larger campaign reports involving Adeptus Mechanicus operations. Unlike the logistical summaries produced by the Adeptus Administratum or the technical telemetry preserved by Mechanicus command nodes, Inquisition documentation tends to focus on behavioral anomalies, unexplained battlefield phenomena, and deviations from established Mechanicus doctrine. The Order Hereticus and Order Xenos have both compiled observations regarding Skitarii cybernetic constructs over the course of several centuries, largely due to the complex relationship between the Adeptus Mechanicus and the broader authority structure of the Imperium. While the Forge Worlds maintain official loyalty to the Emperor and contribute extensively to Imperial war efforts, their technological autonomy and restricted data vaults often generate curiosity or suspicion among inquisitorial investigators. Ruststalker units have attracted particular attention within these investigations because their combination of extreme augmentation and aggressive combat doctrine occasionally produces operational behavior that appears unusual when examined outside Mechanicus analytical frameworks. One early Inquisition observation originates from a sealed report compiled by an Ordo Hereticus observer, attached to a joint Imperial Guard and Mechanicus campaign on an industrial world whose name remains partially redacted in surviving documentation. The investigator noted that Ruststalker units deployed during the campaign appeared to exhibit a degree of predictive coordination, exceeding what might normally be expected from constructs relying solely on neural interfaces and command signals. During one engagement within the lower districts of a hive manufactorum, the observer recorded multiple instances in which Ruststalker units altered their movement patterns moments before enemy forces initiated ambushes. In each case, the constructs adjusted their approach routes in ways that avoided the prepared firing lanes established by hostile troops. The Inquisitor responsible for the report acknowledged that such maneuvers might be explained by the Ruststalker's advanced sensor arrays and predictive algorithms. However, the frequency with which these adjustments occurred prompted speculation that the constructs were processing environmental cues at a level approaching preemptive tactical anticipation. The report concludes with a brief remark noting that the Adeptus Mechanicus did not provide detailed information regarding the internal architecture of Ruststalker neural processors when questioned about these observations. As a result, the exact mechanisms responsible for their anticipatory behavior remain undocumented within the Inquisition archive. Another series of observations concerns the psychological presence Ruststalker units appear to project during combat encounters. Several inquisitorial observers have commented on the unusual reactions displayed by human troops operating alongside these constructs. In multiple campaign logs, Imperial Guard soldiers reported feelings of unease when stationed near Ruststalker formations prior to deployment. These reactions occurred even among veteran troops accustomed to fighting alongside heavily augmented Mechanicus units. The soldiers described the Ruststalker's movements as unnervingly quiet despite the presence of numerous mechanical components within their bodies. Helmet recordings taken from Imperial infantry during joint operations reveal that Ruststalker units often remain completely motionless for extended periods before engagement. When orders are issued through Mechanicus command channels, the constructs activate almost simultaneously and begin moving with abrupt acceleration. This transition from stillness to rapid movement appears to produce a psychological effect on nearby observers. Several soldiers described the impression that the Ruststalkers were not merely waiting for instructions, but calculating the optimal moment to begin their attack. Although such interpretations may reflect the stress of combat environments, the repetition of similar descriptions across separate reports has drawn the attention of Inquisition analysts examining the phenomenon. Inquisitorial documentation also includes references to Ruststalker encounters with hostile entities that produced unusual battlefield outcomes. One such report concerns an incident during an exploratory campaign in which Mechanicus forces entered an abandoned industrial installation believed to contain lost technological artifacts. Ruststalker reconnaissance units were dispatched into the interior corridors ahead of the main expedition. According to the surviving Inquisition commentary attached to the mission record, the constructs encountered hostile resistance within the lower levels of the installation. Combat telemetry transmitted by their helmet sensors showed rapid engagement sequences consistent with standard Ruststalker tactics. However, the observer assigned to the expedition noted an unusual irregularity within the combat data. Several Ruststalker units appeared to pursue enemy targets beyond the boundaries of the mapped corridors before abruptly terminating their advance. The telemetry logs show brief fluctuations in signal transmission during this period, after which the constructs returned to their original patrol routes without explanation. The Mechanicus command personnel overseeing the mission attributed the interruption to interference generated by damaged industrial power systems within the facility. The Inquisition observer accepted this explanation in the official record, but appended a personal remark stating that the telemetry disruption did not correspond to any known pattern of environmental interference documented elsewhere in the archive. Other Inquisition observations relate to the manner in which Ruststalker units respond to battlefield casualties among their own formations. Unlike conventional human soldiers, the constructs do not exhibit visible hesitation when a fellow unit becomes disabled during combat. Ruststalkers continue their assigned assault patterns regardless of the damage sustained by adjacent constructs. While such behavior is consistent with the neural conditioning applied during Skitarii augmentation, some observers have noted that Ruststalker units occasionally adjust their movement routes to recover components from fallen constructs after the engagement has concluded. These recovery actions are conducted quickly and without verbal communication, suggesting that the units recognize the strategic importance of preserving certain internal systems. Inquisitorial analysts have speculated that this behavior may indicate the presence of priority protocols embedded within the Ruststalker command architecture. Such protocols would ensure that valuable technological components are returned to Mechanicus custody whenever possible, preventing their capture by hostile forces. Another curious element occasionally noted in Inquisition reports concerns the atmospheric effects produced by Ruststalker weapons during close combat engagements. The oxidizing agents coating transonic blades are designed to accelerate corrosion within metallic targets. Yet several observers have reported faint chemical haze lingering in the air after intense engagements. These vapor traces appear briefly in helmet recordings before dispersing into the surrounding environment. While the Mechanicus explanation attributes the haze to residual oxidizing compounds interacting with exposed metal surfaces, some Inquisition scribes have remarked that the phenomenon occasionally persists longer than expected under controlled atmospheric conditions. Such details rarely lead to formal investigation, but they are sometimes preserved within sealed appendices for future reference should additional anomalies occur. The Inquisition has also taken note of the manner in which Ruststalker units integrate with Mechanicus command networks during operations involving multiple Imperial factions. Unlike Imperial Guard units that rely heavily on vocal command structures and visual signals, Ruststalkers communicate almost entirely through encrypted data exchanges transmitted between neural interfaces. This communication method allows the constructs to coordinate their movements silently, but it also prevents external observers from easily interpreting their tactical decisions. Several Inquisition observers have expressed concern that this lack of transparency makes it difficult to determine exactly how Ruststalker formations interpret battlefield conditions when operating alongside non-Mechanicus forces. Despite these concerns, No evidence has emerged suggesting that Ruststalker units have ever acted in direct opposition to Imperial objectives during joint campaigns. Their actions consistently align with the strategic goals established by Mechanicus command authorities. Nevertheless, the Inquisition maintains a cautious interest in the technological evolution of Skitarii constructs due to the increasing sophistication of their neural augmentation systems. Among the most unusual observations recorded within Inquisition files is a pattern occasionally noted during long-duration Mechanicus campaigns. Some investigators have reported that Ruststalker units deployed repeatedly within the same operational theatre appear to demonstrate gradual improvements in tactical efficiency that exceed what might normally be expected from static combat algorithms. In certain battle records, constructs that participated in earlier engagements later displayed altered movement routes and attack sequences when encountering similar enemy formations. These adaptations suggest that the constructs were integrating prior combat experience into their decision-making processes. Mechanicus officials have consistently explained this phenomenon as the result of updated command algorithms transmitted through Skitarii data networks between engagements. According to their explanation, battlefield telemetry collected during each operation is analysed by tech priests, who then refine the tactical routines used by Ruststalker units. While this explanation remains plausible, several Inquisition analysts have observed that the adjustments occasionally appear more nuanced than simple algorithm updates might produce. In a few cases, the construct's responses to new threats resembled improvisation rather than pre-programmed behaviour. These observations have never resulted in formal accusations against the Adeptus Mechanicus. The Forge worlds remain one of the Imperium's most essential allies, providing technological support without which the Imperium's military structure would collapse. However, the existence of such anomalies ensures that the Inquisition continues to monitor developments within Mechanicus cybernetic research. The fusion of human cognition and advanced machine processing inherent in constructs such as the Ruststalker represents a frontier of technological capability whose long-term implications remain uncertain. From the Inquisition's perspective, the Ruststalker therefore occupies a curious position within the Imperium's military ecosystem. It is simultaneously a loyal instrument of the Emperor's war machine and a product of technological experimentation conducted largely beyond the oversight of Imperial authorities. The constructs themselves rarely attract attention during the grand narratives of war. They appear briefly within the enclosed corridors of manufactorums, shipyards, and subterranean installations, before disappearing again into the Mechanicus maintenance chambers where their systems are repaired and recalibrated. Yet within the sealed vaults of the Inquisition, scattered observations continue to accumulate, regarding their unusual combat behaviour, their silent coordination, and the occasional anomalies recorded during their operations. These records do not present definitive conclusions. Instead, they serve as fragments of a larger pattern that inquisitorial analysts continue to examine cautiously. For the moment, the Sicarian Ruststalker remains categorized as a highly effective Mechanicus combat construct, whose activities fall within acceptable parameters of Imperial warfare. But the unusual characteristics documented in these observations ensure that the Inquisition maintains a watchful interest in the continued evolution of these cybernetic hunters. Within the sealed annexes of several inquisitorial data repositories, scattered records exist describing unusual battlefield circumstances involving Sicarian Ruststalker units. These documents rarely appear in primary campaign reports. Instead, they are usually attached as secondary observations by investigators assigned to monitor Adeptus Mechanicus operations. The nature of these entries varies widely. Some describe unexpected tactical outcomes, while others focus on behavioural irregularities observed during or immediately after combat engagements. None of these records directly accuse the Adeptus Mechanicus of doctrinal deviation or technological heresy. However, the consistency with which certain patterns recur has led several inquisitorial archivists to preserve the reports for long-term study. One such report originates from an Inquisition observer attached to a multi-regimental Imperial campaign on a frontier mining world located near the outer boundaries of Segmentum Obscurus. the world had experienced widespread industrial collapse after a prolonged conflict with heretical insurgent forces occupying multiple refinery complexes. Mechanicus forces were deployed to secure surviving infrastructure and restore operational control over key manufactorum facilities. Among the units dispatched into the underground processing levels were several maniples of Sicarian Ruststalkers tasked with clearing defensive corridors established by the insurgents. According to helmet recordings recovered from accompanying Skitarii command personnel, the Ruststalkers advanced through a network of narrow service tunnels leading toward the primary refinery control center. Enemy combatants had prepared multiple barricades along the route, supported by automated turrets constructed from salvaged industrial equipment. Standard Skitarii units engaged these defenses at range, while Ruststalker elements maneuvered through adjacent maintenance shafts to bypass the barricades. The constructs emerged behind the insurgent positions and initiated close assault operations. The engagement itself proceeded in a manner consistent with known Ruststalker tactics. Transonic blades penetrated armor plating and weapon housings with little resistance, while chordclaw appendages disabled the remaining defenders. However, the Inquisition observer reviewing the combat telemetry noted an unusual detail within the recorded data. Several Ruststalker units appeared to change their movement routes before encountering enemy resistance that had not yet been detected by Mechanicus sensor systems. The constructs entered alternate passageways moments before hidden insurgent fighters activated ambush positions along the main corridor. These deviations occurred repeatedly throughout the engagement. Mechanicus command personnel attributed the phenomenon to predictive threat analysis conducted by the Ruststalker neural processors. According to their explanation, the constructs were capable of analyzing subtle environmental irregularities such as heat fluctuations, airflow disturbances, or acoustic echoes that might indicate concealed enemies. The Inquisition observer acknowledged this explanation in the official report, yet an attached commentary noted that the predictive adjustments sometimes occurred before any detectable environmental change was recorded by nearby sensors. The commentary concluded that the behavior remained unexplained within the available data. Another sealed document describes an incident during a Mechanicus salvage operation conducted on a partially abandoned orbital shipyard installation. The structure had suffered extensive damage during a prior naval conflict, leaving large sections of the facility exposed to vacuum while interior sectors remained operational. A combined force of Skitarii infantry and Ruststalker units was deployed to investigate the remaining manufactorum chambers. According to the Inquisition observer accompanying the expedition, Ruststalker reconnaissance teams advanced into the interior corridors ahead of the main force. The early stages of the mission proceeded without incident. Ruststalker units systematically searched storage compartments and maintenance passages while transmitting structural data back to the Mechanicus command center. Several hours into the operation, however, the constructs encountered hostile entities within a sealed cargo processing bay. The exact identity of these adversaries remains unclear due to redactions within the surviving Inquisition report. Combat telemetry indicates that the Ruststalkers engage multiple targets simultaneously within a confined chamber filled with suspended cargo platforms. Helmet recordings captured rapid sequences of blade strikes and mechanical impacts as the constructs eliminated resistance throughout the bay. Yet during the engagement, signal transmission from several Ruststalker units temporarily disappeared from the command network. The disruption lasted only a few seconds before the units reconnected and resumed their assault patterns. The Mechanicus technical explanation attributed the interruption to electromagnetic interference generated by damaged reactor components located beneath the cargo chamber. The Inquisition observer accepted this possibility, but noted that the disruption coincided precisely with the moment when the constructs pursued several hostile contacts beyond the visible boundaries of the chamber. When telemetry resumed, the Ruststalkers were positioned several meters away from their previously recorded locations. No physical passageways connecting those positions were visible within the chamber layout. The report concludes without definitive explanation. The Inquisition archivist, who later catalogued the document, noted that the incident might have involved unrecorded structural damage within the chamber walls, that allowed movement through hidden service conduits. Nevertheless, the unusual telemetry gap was preserved as a point of interest within the sealed archive. A third document concerns a protracted war fought on an industrial hive world where multiple factions contested control of manufacturing infrastructure over several years. Adeptus Mechanicus forces eventually intervened to restore production lines deemed vital to the Imperium's war economy. Ruststalker units participated in numerous urban engagements throughout the conflict, frequently deployed into lower hive districts where enemy forces had fortified entire neighborhoods with improvised defenses. According to several Inquisition field notes, Ruststalker formations operating in these environments demonstrated an unusual pattern of pursuit behavior. After eliminating primary enemy resistance within a sector, the constructs occasionally continued moving through surrounding streets and structures even after the battle had effectively ended. These extended patrol movements lasted for several minutes before the units returned to their assigned command positions. Mechanicus officers overseeing the campaign explained that the Ruststalkers were performing automated threat sweeps designed to identify concealed survivors or secondary ambush positions. While such sweeps were considered standard practice in many military operations, Inquisition observers noted that the constructs sometimes followed highly irregular routes through the surrounding environment. In one recorded instance, a Ruststalker unit entered a collapsed building that had not previously been identified as a potential threat location. Moments later, the constructs emerged carrying the remains of an enemy scout who had apparently been hiding within the structure. The scout had not transmitted any signals detectable by Imperial equipment prior to discovery. The accuracy with which the Ruststalker units located concealed enemies during these patrol movements raised questions among several observers regarding the range and sensitivity of their detection systems. Mechanicus representatives responded by emphasizing the advanced sensory arrays integrated into Ruststalker helmet assemblies. These systems included thermal imaging devices, acoustic sensors capable of detecting subtle vibrations, and atmospheric analyzers capable of identifying chemical traces associated with biological activity. From a purely technical perspective, these capabilities could plausibly explain the construct's ability to locate hidden targets. Nonetheless, the frequency with which such discoveries occurred in the absence of measurable signals led the Inquisition observers to retain the reports for further study. Several additional sealed documents describe encounters between Ruststalker units and hostile Xenos forces during exploratory expeditions conducted on newly rediscovered worlds. One such account records a brief engagement within a dense jungle region where Mechanicus survey teams had encountered resistance from unidentified alien organisms inhabiting the forest canopy. Ruststalker units were deployed to protect the survey teams while they recovered archaeological artifacts from a partially buried structure. Helmet recordings from the engagement show the constructs moving through thick vegetation with surprising speed despite the uneven terrain. During the battle, several Ruststalker units appeared to anticipate attacks from the canopy, moments before the alien creatures launched their assault. The constructs responded by redirecting their movements and striking upward into the foliage with transonic blades, eliminating multiple attackers before they reached ground level. The Mechanicus explanation again referenced predictive combat algorithms combined with sensory input from atmospheric scanners capable of detecting movement through air displacement. However, the Inquisition archivist who later reviewed the report included a marginal note observing that the construct's reactions sometimes occurred before the attackers produced measurable disturbances within the surrounding vegetation. Another unusual report concerns an engagement against a renegade Mechanicus faction that had seized control of a remote research facility. Imperial authorities dispatched loyalist Mechanicus forces to reclaim the installation and secure any experimental technology stored within the complex. During the assault on the facility, Ruststalker units engaged hostile Skitarii constructs within the interior laboratories. The close quarters of the research chambers forced both sides into rapid melee combat. Helmet recordings recovered after the battle show several Ruststalker units altering their attack sequences during the engagement. Instead of targeting the enemy construct's primary weapon systems, the loyalist Ruststalkers focused their strikes on specific cybernetic connection points located near the base of the renegade unit's spinal augmentations. These precision attacks disabled the enemy constructs within seconds, severing their neural interfaces and rendering them incapable of further combat. Mechanics officials later explained that Ruststalker targeting protocols included detailed anatomical data regarding common Skitarii augmentations, allowing them to exploit structural vulnerabilities in hostile cybernetic constructs. While the explanation appeared reasonable, the Inquisition observer noted that the specific connection points targeted during the engagement corresponded to experimental augmentation systems believed to have been unique to the renegade faction. It remained unclear how the loyalist Ruststalker units had acquired such precise information regarding the enemy modifications prior to the battle. The final remark within the report suggests that the constructs may have received updated targeting instructions through encrypted Mechanicus data transmissions during the engagement itself. Whether this explanation accounts fully for the observed precision remains uncertain. Taken together, these sealed records illustrate the type of anomalies that occasionally appear within inquisitorial documentation involving Sicarian Ruststalker operations. None of the individual reports provide conclusive evidence of technological irregularities or doctrinal violations. Instead, they represent a collection of observations describing combat behaviors that sometimes extend beyond easily measurable parameters. The Adeptus Mechanicus consistently attributes such phenomena to the sophisticated sensor systems and neural processing capabilities integrated into Ruststalker constructs. Given the advanced nature of Mechanicus technology, these explanations remain entirely plausible within the broader context of Imperial warfare. Nevertheless, the Inquisition continues to preserve these accounts within restricted archives. The combination of human cognition and machine processing embedded within Ruststalker augmentations represents a complex technological frontier, one that occasionally produces results difficult to analyze using conventional military frameworks. As a result, every unusual encounter involving these cybernetic hunters becomes another entry within the quiet catalogue of sealed reports maintained by the Imperium's most watchful observers. Within the deeper vaults of several inquisitorial archives, classified files relating to the deployment of Sicarian Ruststalker units are stored alongside broader technological assessments of the Adeptus Mechanicus. These documents are rarely referenced in standard campaign reports. Instead, they exist as internal memoranda compiled by analysts tasked with monitoring the long-term development of Mechanicus cybernetic warfare platforms. The majority of these records do not contain accusations or condemnations. Rather, they present a careful examination of how advanced cybernetic constructs operate within the Imperium's military hierarchy. In the case of the Ruststalker, this examination focuses primarily on the implications of combining heavily modified human cognition with highly adaptive machine processing systems. Several early classified summaries begin by acknowledging that the Ruststalker represents one of the most extreme forms of Skitarii augmentation currently deployed in Imperial service. The transformation process that produces these constructs strips away most of the biological limitations associated with ordinary human soldiers. Musculature is replaced with synthetic fiber bundles capable of exerting force beyond normal human capacity. Neural structures are altered to process command data and environmental input with remarkable efficiency. The result is a combat unit capable of executing complex tactical maneuvers at speeds that ordinary infantry cannot easily match. From a purely military standpoint, inquisitorial analysts have repeatedly concluded that the Ruststalker performs its assigned role with exceptional effectiveness. Numerous battlefield records confirm that small numbers of these constructs can eliminate fortified enemy positions that would otherwise require significantly larger Imperial forces to overcome. Their quiet movement patterns, rapid reaction times, and lethal close quarters weaponry allow them to neutralize threats inside confined environments such as manufactorums, orbital stations, and subterranean installations. These are precisely the types of locations where the Imperium's industrial infrastructure is most vulnerable. Because of this capability, several Inquisition memoranda describe Ruststalker maniples as valuable assets within Mechanicus expeditionary forces. Their presence significantly increases the probability that critical technological installations can be reclaimed intact after enemy occupation. However, the same memoranda also emphasize that the technological principles underlying Ruststalker augmentation remain largely inaccessible to Imperial authorities outside the Adeptus Mechanicus. The Mechanicus maintains strict control over the data required to produce and maintain Skitarii constructs. Forge Worlds rarely disclose detailed schematics regarding neural interface architecture or cognitive processing routines embedded within these systems. Even Inquisitors granted limited access to Mechanicus facilities typically receive only partial information concerning the internal operation of such constructs. As a result, Inquisition analysts are often forced to rely on indirect observation when evaluating Ruststalker behavior. One set of classified files concerns long-term combat performance analysis compiled from numerous Mechanicus campaigns across multiple sectors. These records attempt to identify recurring patterns in Ruststalker deployment and operational effectiveness. The findings indicate that Ruststalker units consistently perform best when operating within environments that restrict large-scale maneuvering by conventional forces. Dense urban districts, industrial corridors, and labyrinthine maintenance tunnels all provide terrain conditions favourable to the Ruststalker method of warfare. Within these environments, the constructs are capable of isolating enemy combatants and eliminating them in rapid succession. Their ability to move silently through narrow passageways allows them to bypass defensive lines and attack critical targets directly. From an inquisitorial perspective, this specialization has both advantages and potential concerns. The advantages are obvious. Ruststalker units allow the Adeptus Mechanicus to reclaim vital infrastructure quickly without causing widespread structural damage that might render such facilities unusable. The potential concerns arise from the fact that the constructs operate largely beyond the direct oversight of other Imperial institutions during such operations. In most campaigns involving Ruststalkers, command authority remains firmly within Mechanicus hierarchies. Skitarii marshals and tech priest Dominus figures issue orders through encrypted data networks that are not easily accessible to external observers. This command structure allows the Mechanicus to coordinate its cybernetic forces efficiently, but it also means that the precise decision-making processes guiding Ruststalker units are rarely visible to Imperial commanders outside the Mechanicus organization. Several Inquisition reports note that this limited transparency occasionally complicates joint operations involving multiple Imperial factions. Imperial Guard officers accustomed to traditional command protocols may find it difficult to anticipate Ruststalker movements because the constructs communicate almost entirely through digital command channels. Despite these complications, no verified case exists in which Ruststalker units have deliberately acted against Imperial objectives during combined campaigns. Another classified file addresses the psychological implications of the Ruststalker augmentation process itself. The Skitarii who become Ruststalkers begin their service as human recruits drawn from populations under Mechanicus authority. Through successive stages of augmentation, much of their biological identity is replaced by mechanical systems designed to enhance combat performance. Inquisitorial scholars studying the process have raised occasional philosophical questions regarding the cognitive state of these constructs once the transformation is complete. The Ruststalker mind retains elements of the original human neural structure, yet it operates within a framework dominated by machine logic and external command inputs. The resulting mental architecture is difficult to categorize using conventional definitions of either human or artificial intelligence. Some analysts have suggested that Ruststalker cognition may represent a hybrid state in which human instincts coexist with algorithmic decision structures. This theory could explain certain battlefield behaviors observed in prior campaign reports, particularly instances where Ruststalker units appear to respond to threats with unusual speed or anticipation. Other analysts reject this interpretation and argue that all Ruststalker actions can be explained through advanced sensor arrays and predictive combat algorithms maintained by Mechanicus command systems. the debate remains unresolved within the classified files. The Inquisition has not attempted to intervene directly in the internal processes by which the Mechanicus creates its Skitarii constructs. Such intervention would risk damaging a critical alliance that underpins the Imperium's technological infrastructure. Instead, the Inquisition's approach has been one of careful observation. Another group of classified records examines the strategic implications of Ruststalker deployment patterns across multiple centuries. These files indicate that the Adeptus Mechanicus has gradually expanded the use of specialized Skitarii units in recent millennia. While earlier Mechanicus armies relied more heavily on conventional Skitarii infantry formations, modern campaigns increasingly feature diverse cybernetic constructs designed for specific combat roles. Ruststalkers represent one such specialization focused on rapid infiltration and close quarters elimination. Inquisitorial analysts note that this trend reflects the broader technological philosophy of the Mechanicus, which favors incremental improvement through experimentation and adaptation. Some analysts speculate that future iterations of Skitarii augmentation may produce constructs with even greater autonomy or enhanced cognitive processing capabilities. Such developments could significantly alter the balance of power within Imperial military structures. For the moment, however, Ruststalker units remain firmly integrated into the Mechanicus chain of command. Their actions continue to align with the Imperium's broader strategic objectives. The final pages of several classified memoranda present a general conclusion regarding the status of Sicarian Ruststalkers within the Imperium. From the Inquisition's perspective, these constructs represent a powerful but controlled manifestation of Mechanicus technological expertise. Their lethality on the battlefield is undeniable, yet their loyalty appears firmly anchored to the authority structures of the Forge worlds that created them. The Inquisition recognizes that without the technological mastery of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Imperium would be unable to maintain its vast fleets, weapon systems, and industrial production networks. Skitarii constructs such as the Ruststalker are therefore regarded as necessary components of the Imperium's war machine. At the same time, the classified files emphasize that any technology capable of altering human cognition so profoundly must be monitored carefully over long periods of time. The combination of organic intelligence and machine processing embedded within Ruststalker augmentation represents a form of warfare that few outside the Mechanicus fully understand. While the constructs currently operate within acceptable parameters of Imperial doctrine, their existence demonstrates how far the boundaries of cybernetic modification have already advanced. For this reason, the Inquisition continues to catalogue every unusual encounter involving Ruststalker units, preserving the information within restricted archives for future analysis. The final notation within one such file summarizes the prevailing inquisitorial stance in a single restrained observation. The Sicarian Ruststalker is not considered a threat to the Imperium. It is considered a development worthy of continued scrutiny. In a galaxy defined by endless war and technological relics, whose origins stretch back into forgotten ages, vigilance remains the only reliable safeguard. And so, the silent hunters of the Adeptus Mechanicus continue to move through the industrial shadows of the Imperium, carrying out their assigned duties while distant observers within the Inquisition quietly record each step of their evolution.